Good evening. My name is Jeff Commons. I'm an attorney for the Public Service Department, and the department is tasked with hosting an information session before the hearing to be public hearing to be held by the Public Service Board. So mostly it's going to be other people talking, and then you get to ask questions. I just want to start off a little bit by just saying who we are, the department, and what our role in this case is. So the Public Service Department is a separate agency from the Public Service Board. We're not connected, although we, in proceedings of the Public Service Board, the department acts as the public advocate. We are to represent the interests of the people of the state in matters requiring hearings by the board. And so that's what I and my colleagues do. And it can be an interesting job, I'm sure you can imagine, because the public does not always all agree on any number of issues. But we certainly do our best to listen to the public and to take positions that are in the public interest. In this particular case, there is a proposal in front of the Public Service Board to transfer the Vermont Yankee nuclear plant. And our job is to really thoroughly vet that proposal. We're engaged in discovery, which is a formal process of asking questions and getting written answers. And it's, I'm sure you can imagine that we take this very seriously. If this nuclear plant is going to be transferred, that's a pretty big deal, and decommissioning is a really big deal. And we know that the interests of people in this area and the interests of people all around the state are really affected by it. So I am always happy to be at public hearings because that's when I get to hear most directly from folks who are affected by proposals in front of the Public Service Board. We have, at the department, we have experts in-house. We have engineering experts as well as accounting experts and planners. We also hire outside assistants as needed, financial analysts and people with expertise in the area of nuclear decommissioning and so forth. And all of those people come together to form a team. And as I say, we are examining the proposal that's in front of the board really very, very closely. We have not taken a position as yet. We will when we file testimony. But until then, we are, as I say, asking a lot of questions and really looking carefully at the answers and making sure that we get the best understanding we possibly can about the transaction that's proposed. So this is an information session, and so what I'd like to do is introduce two people who are here on behalf of the petitioners. The petitioners are Entergy Corporation and North Star, and so let me introduce. This is Scott State with North Star and Mike Toomey, who is with Entergy Nuclear, and they are going to provide some information, make some remarks about the proposal in front of the board, and then I believe they will be open to taking your questions. And I look forward to an interesting conversation. And then later at 7 o'clock, the Public Service Board will be here, and they will open that part of this evening. And at that point, they will be looking to hear comments from the public, comments and opinions and about the proposal that's in front of them. Right now is an opportunity for you to learn about it, to ask questions about it, and later will be the opportunity to tell the Public Service Board and the public advocate, frankly, what your feelings are about it. So let me turn it over to Mr. State and Mr. Toomey.
Thank you, Jeff. As Mr. Commons noted, I'm Mike Toomey. I'm here on behalf of Entergy Nuclear Vermont Investment Company and Entergy Nuclear Operations, Inc. We are two of the applicants who submitted a proposal to the Public Service Board. Mr. State is the CEO of North Star. I have a few brief remarks, and so does Mr. State. We did not prepare a formal presentation because we wanted to give the maximum amount of time for questions and answers this evening. As everybody knows, we announced that we would be closing Vermont Yankee in August of 2013. We made that announcement. A few months later, we negotiated a settlement agreement with the state, numerous aspects of the state, to resolve some important issues that were pending at that time. And then the plant closed in December of 2014. As the owner of the plant with the obligation to decommission the facility, we evaluated the various options for decommissioning the facility, returning it to productive use. And in that evaluation, we reached the conclusion that transferring the project to a company that is an expert in decommissioning, whose business is to decommission, that such a transfer would be in the best interests of Vermont. And as a result, we negotiated an agreement, and we have now presented that agreement to the Public Service Board for approval. We need the Public Service Board's approval for various reasons under Vermont law that I won't get into detail here. And we also have a pending application at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for the same transfer. We need approval from both the state and the federal agencies here. And if the transfer is approved, it is our hope to execute the sale in 2018, probably the latter part of 2018, given the schedule of the various agencies. And at that point, the project would be owned by North Star, who would also have control of the decommissioning trust fund that we currently hold, and they would do the work. We do believe this is in the best interests of the state of Vermont, and particularly Windham County, and that's why we have proposed this transaction. I'm not going to go into any more detail because I'm sure there are lots of questions and I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions, but I'll turn it over to Scott to introduce himself and to talk a little bit about North Star.
Thank you, Mike. North Star, as Mike indicated, engaged with Entergy some 2+ years ago to discuss the opportunity to decommission this plant. It was around the time the plant was closing, and our business model is one of decommissioning large facilities around the United States and in different parts of the world. We're the largest decommissioning company in the world, and our partners that we've engaged in this project are some of the largest companies in the world that work with radiological waste and nuclear projects. I'd like to introduce Areva. There's some gentlemen in the back of the room, Red Bailey from France, and Washington, D.C., his partner, Jeff. The Areva team joined us early on in this process, and for those of you that don't know Areva, it's the world's largest nuclear services company, operations worldwide, and very extensive experience in dealing with highly contaminated radiological sites. WCS is also a partner. For those of you that recognize that name, WCS, Waste Control Specialist, is already a partner with Vermont. Vermont is in a compact with Texas for disposal of low-level radioactive waste. And we have a representative, Dan Burns, from WCS here this evening. I introduced these gentlemen specifically because if there's a break this evening, you're certainly welcome to approach any of them and engage in some dialogue. Our interest here is specifically to remove what we view as a radiologically contaminated facility. I understand that most of you would view this as a nuclear power plant. I'm a nuclear engineer by training. While the plant sits there today, it was once a nuclear power plant. In our view, and the way we look at a project like this, it's a radiologically contaminated site. And as such, we would decommission this facility like we would decommission any facility of this type that's a radiologically contaminated facility. We intend to do that in a safe manner. We intend to be open, transparent, and accessible to the local community. And we expect to be able to complete this project some 40-plus years before it would likely be done under the current expected approach. So with that, as Mike indicated, we don't want to dominate the evening with presentation of what we think may or may not be important. I'd really like to hear from anyone and everyone from the local community, hear your concerns, and give you our perspective or our responses to those concerns. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jethro. I live so I live up in Guilford, not far, and I believe I'm in the zone if anything was to go wrong. But my question is you guys have never decommissioned something this large, right? This is the first.
No, that's not true.
It's not true.
Yeah.
So you guys have decommissioned plants this size.
We've been involved with decommissioning as Arriva of a number of nuclear power plants, both in the United States and in the UK. We've not decommissioned a nuclear power plant as the owner of a nuclear power plant. This is a first of its kind transaction in that regard. But I had thought about providing some video this evening. I got a lot of video of major projects that we've done where you can see the scale of work that we do. We've done a lot of projects that in terms of man hours and effort are significantly larger than this. In terms of the dollar value, this is a very large project, primarily because there's radiological waste, which has a very high disposal cost. But in terms of pure man hours and effort to do the work, we've done dozens, if not hundreds, of projects of this scale or bigger.
Sure. And I guess I'm just not clear on how you guys can do it so much faster and for so much cheaper than Entergy could.
So we're not doing the project a lot faster. We're doing the project a lot sooner. The plan as it currently is filed for the plant is to defer the decommissioning until 2060 something, I think. We're simply going to start the project in 2018 or 2019, actually 2019, if this petition is approved. So we aren't really doing the project faster. There is some level of cost savings associated with the way we're doing the project, and that's really driven by the fact that, if you think about it this way, if you have a project to do at your house and you hire a general contractor versus doing it yourself, which is going to cost more? It's going to cost more if you hire somebody to do it than if you do it yourself. And
Well, depends on if you know how to do it.
Depends on
Like I'm building my own house, I'm not going to hire someone.
But so look at it this way. So if we take on this project as the owner, the homeowner, so to speak,
Sure.
and do it ourselves versus somebody else owns it and they hire us to do it, there's an incremental cost between those two. There's not a really large cost difference between the two approaches. If you really look at it apples to apples, it's about a 10 to 12% difference in overall cost savings that we bring by doing it as opposed to being hired by someone else to do it. And that's just the cost of management and oversight and that type of thing.
But you say because you know how to do it, but you've never decommissioned a nuclear power plant before.
We've never decommissioned a nuclear power plant as an owner. But let me just kind of walk you through what decommissioning...
I want to give other people a chance. I can stand up here all day. And
Go for it.
You're doing good.
Well, let me just add a point here. Entergy has never decommissioned a plant as an owner, either. Okay?
Talking to the
Can you talk to the mic?
Entergy has never decommissioned a nuclear power plant as an owner, either.
Right.
If we were to undertake this project, we would have to hire experts to do the work, because that's not the business we're in. We're in the business of operating plants and generating electricity. We are not in the business of decommissioning. So for us to do the work means that we have to have a full organization to monitor the work, and then we have to hire contractors to perform the work. And that adds complexity and cost to the project. So I think it's a great question for you to ask Scott about their experience and expertise. We were certainly satisfied by their level of expertise and experience, but it's important to put in context what you're comparing it to, because the statement that they've never decommissioned a nuclear power plant as the owner applies equally to us.
Sure. Well, I'm curious about also just you guys are going to be opening up a new LLC just for this particular project, right?
We are, well, yes and no. We are buying the company that owns the plant. That's still the entity that will own the plant and perform the work.
I just know like this just keeps shutting off. Sorry. But
It worked.
yeah. But so as far as if you were all right, if anything happens, who's going to be responsible? Because if it's under an LLC, like you're not responsible. I mean, who's going to be responsible if anything goes wrong? I mean, this is a nuclear.
Well, let me just be clear. I think it is, you made an important point about giving everybody else an opportunity to ask questions too. I don't want to turn this into a 45-minute debate, but Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee LLC is the company that owns the plant today.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't agree with your characterization that an LLC is not responsible. We are an LLC today, before we do this transfer.
Yeah.
And whatever corporate structure North Star has set up, they have to demonstrate will be sufficient to address financial concerns. But I just want to be clear that, again, you got to compare it to what you currently have in front of you.
Yes, sir.
You gotta hold it down and then talk.
Like, are we good?
I think you gotta hold it down. Hold it down for a minute. It turns red and then it.
Where's the button?
In the middle.
Are we good?
Yeah.
My name's John Fields. So I've got some related questions. I'd like to know what are the metrics that you guys are going to be using for having the plant fully decommissioned in terms of getting it cleaned? What scientific metrics, levels of mitigation of pollution? That's the first part. The second part is, do those metrics include non-radiological pollution? My understanding is that they do not. And if they do not, why not? And third, my understanding is that you folks are using an assessment that was done of pollution in 2014. Why would that be appropriate? Why shouldn't there be an assessment of all forms of pollution, radiological and non-radiological, as of today, or as of the date of the sale?
Okay. So let's start with number one. The release standard or release criteria that we've proposed are related to exposure rates to humans from radiological material. Those are standards that are used consistently across the country. They're standards set by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We've proposed standards in our application, and we expect to have dialogue with the state about what appropriate release criteria, radiological release criteria would be. So there are a very detailed set of standards related to radiological exposure that essentially, when accomplished, would release the site for unrestricted use. So it's our objective not to leave a site with a fence around it that says, with a placard that says radioactive materials. We want a site that, when we're done, is a developable, free releasable site. So that's the standards that we are seeking for radiological release.
Does that mean that there is zero radiological release at the point that you declare the site safe?
Well, getting to an absolute zero in anything is generally not achievable because background radiation in this part of the country is substantial. So the standard as it's used or as it's established with the NRC is set so that the release standard is called the resident farmer standard. I mean, you can research all of this. And essentially what we do is we take measurements with meters of exposure rates. We take samples of soil and water and air, and we feed all of that into an analytical model. And in that model, we look at what would be considered a resident farmer. In other words, a farmer living on the site, raising crops, eating those crops, feeding those crops to livestock. Those livestock drink water, he drinks water, everybody breathes the air. And the exposure associated with that person is within a very, very, very stringent standard as to what that person would have as any exposure from that site. That's the general release criteria that we use.
Does that apply to the water underground as well? We know there's been huge tritium releases that are been alarming. Do the metrics include, and how would you figure the metrics 20 feet, 40 feet underground of ongoing releases of tritium and other radiological products?
Well, tritium releases occurred as part of the operational aspects of the plant. There's no new tritium being created today. Tritium, as you probably know, is water, basically. It's water that's tritiated, or it's got an extra neutron, I guess, and you can't separate tritium out of water. It's essentially impossible to do that. But the answer to your question is yes. The levels of tritium and the exposure from tritium goes into that analytical model, and that's taken from groundwater wells surrounding and around the site. All of that data is taken and fed into the analytical model.
As to non-radiological?
Yes, there are standards associated with, Vermont's application of rules such as RECRA, that type of standard, that we have to meet any hazardous type chemicals or aspects of the site. We have to meet requirements related to asbestos, mercury, lead, any environmental contaminants like that of a non-radiological nature. We also have to meet a set of standards that, as part of this process, the PSB, the A&R, and the other various groups in the state will be evaluating, taking samples, taking split samples with us. There'll be a very detailed evaluation and confirmation that when we say the site is clean, the site is clean.
And finally, what about the date, the baseline date? My understanding is it's 2014, not the date of the sale.
Right. The data that we've been provided is 2014. We've taken that data. We are currently evaluating data gaps. We will be doing additional investigative work between now and closing. That's really a commercial issue for us. We want to understand the levels of contamination of the site when we acquire the site or acquire the company that owns the site, because we ultimately have to clean up whatever's there. And so the 2014 data is actually pretty good. We think there's some additional sampling, additional collection of information that would be helpful. We will be doing that between now and the closing of the transaction. But we're not alarmed by the date of that 2014 site assessment work. That's provided us useful information in determining what the ultimate cost will be to clean the site up.
Gotta get the microphone back.
I would just like to point out, it's about 6:30, so we're going through the time. I think the discussion has been good. I just want to make sure that people who have questions have an opportunity to ask them.
Okay, my name is Bob Beatty. I live in Brattleboro. I have one question. I'll try to make it succinct. I'm amazed that you guys can clean up this nuclear site as cheaply as you can, or as you're doing it for, it seems like less than half the money that Entergy would do, and I don't, your 10% efficiency thing doesn't really explain it all. So you also alluded to the fact that you're going to have to talk with the state about the standards, and I guess I see that as being kind of a negotiation. So is it possible, with the tight budget that you have, at least hypothetically, that you will not want to do this deal if the state insists that you meet standards where you feel like you won't lose your shirt?
Let me just take one shot at the discrepancy between the numbers, because I think that implicates not only his estimate, but our estimate. I think it might be helpful to walk through at a very high level. When we filed our decommissioned cost estimate back in 2014, we calculated that it would be approximately $1.24 billion to do the whole project. Part of that number was the money we were going to spend moving the spent nuclear fuel from the pool to the pad. That's about $143 million. And we have established a line of credit for that, and we're doing that work, and that's all going to be done before the project gets turned over to North Star. So his number doesn't include the $143 million of work that we're going to do. There are other differences, but I'll just point to one other difference. We've done about $122 million of the work that we identified back in 2014. That work has now been done, it's been paid for out of the trust. So if you just take those two figures, 143 million and 122 million, and you deduct that from our estimate of 1.24 billion, you get a number of 977 million. Yesterday, or today, I'm not sure when the filing went in, I think it went in today, North Star filed its decommissioning cost estimate with the NRC, and that number is $811 million, total, all in for the whole project. So if you compare our number of 977 million to his number of 811 million, you get a difference of about 160 million, a little over 10%, maybe 12%. So that's the difference. It's not a 50% difference. It's a much smaller difference, and it can be explained by going through in detail, which I won't do tonight, all of the different numbers in each company's proposal. But I think it was important, at least to try to answer your first question, that the gap between...
What's in the decommissioning fund now?
It's almost $600 million. And the reason, I'll let Scott get into more detail, the reason his number is 811 million and there's only 600 million is that a lot of that money, or a big chunk of that money, is going to be recovered from the Department of Energy as relates to spent fuel management. But my real key point there was that their number and our number are not that far apart. But Scott, I'll let you answer the second part of his question.
And just to clarify on Mike's numbers, so the 811 million, as Mike indicated, includes cost for security for the dry fuel storage system that's out there. Are you familiar with that aspect of the project? That's DOE's obligation to come and take that spent nuclear fuel away. It's the same at every nuclear power plant in the country. It's an issue that every plant is dealing with. And it's normal course of business at this point in time that you secure the site at the end of the year, you determine how much that costs, you either sue the DOE or you have a settlement with the DOE and you get your money back. So there's a significant amount of money assumed in our cost estimate that's associated with providing security for that 1 acre, 2 acre plot of land with the spent fuel on it for some number of years until the DOE comes and takes it away. The actual cost of the decommissioning, we have enough money in the trust fund today to decommission the plant and do all of the work. The second part of your question, I think, was related to standards. We've built a cost model based on industry standard, what would typically be the textbook levels of exposure rate or other criteria that the NRC has applied across the country. We've also looked at other plants that have been decommissioned in the region, Maine Yankee, Yankee Row, Connecticut Yankee, and we've looked at the incremental cost associated with implementation of those standards. There's a cost difference. That's a difference that we would have to come to some resolution with Entergy on. So there is potential to use a standard slightly different than the NRC standard, but you're right. If there is a break point where if a standard is established that's not achievable, there wouldn't be a situation where we would be able to move forward on the project.
Okay, thank you. My name is Michael Granger. I have a question for each of you. Has Entergy tested the water in the drilled well that goes down into the aquifer for radioactivity? And the question for you is, part of your due diligence, are you going to test the water in that drilled well? From what I understand from nuclear engineers, there's no reason why that water shouldn't be tested, especially because it relates to the aquifer rather than the groundwater.
I actually don't know the answer to that question as I'm sitting here. I know we tested that well years ago, but I don't know how recently it's been tested. My understanding is that there was no contamination in the aquifer based on the testing we did, but that's been several years. And of course, at the time we were doing that, we were concerned about the tritium that was being released from the AOG tunnel on the building, but that particular leak was stopped and there was no further groundwater contamination. However, that's a good question that we can get more information about and get back to you on. We've got several experts in the room here. Somebody could, Paul, can you run that down? If you just turn around, there's a gentleman in a blue blazer with a blue shirt. Paul Paradise probably has the answer to your question and more succinctly than I did.
The scope of the due diligence work that we will do will include sample and analysis data from all available sources, all wells. It'll also include soil samples and air samples and a whole cadre of things. So yes, we'll be looking at all of
I
that.
have a question about who would be holding the bag if the best wishes and the best hopes of this plan fail to materialize.
You'll hold it down the whole time.
Yeah, hold the buck.
And I guess I phrase my question as, who would bear the financial responsibility for paying to complete any decommissioning costs? If, don't hire me to do this job. If the sale were to take place and the new owners depleted the fund without completing the job, what's the current law on whom the financial responsibility would fall?
I'm going to let Scott answer the question by describing the process by which they've got this whole job set up that would actually prevent that from happening.
My question assumes that despite the best wishes, projections, and assumptions, the job is not cleaned up and the decommissioning fund is exhausted. Upon whom would the financial responsibility for the remaining rubble or whatever, on whom would it fall according to current law or current rules?
Okay, to answer that, can I back up a little bit and explain how we're going to do the work in a way that we believe, first of all, provides assurance that we don't run out of money, and then I can talk about specifically what happens if that doesn't work. Is that acceptable?
I am interested in knowing, should you fail for whatever reason,
What if you're wrong?
on whom would the responsibility fall? I'm not asking you to give me insurances. I'm asking to know on who would be responsible for paying if the job wasn't done and the decommissioning fund was expended.
The owner of the plant.
Which is?
Which is the same owner it is today, ENDY, Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee.
But they're a limited liability company and they would have no assets. So how are they going to do it?
Well, that's what I wanted to explain. The decommissioning trust fund, at which we know the value of it because it's money or assets in an account today. What we've done, which has never been done before, is we've taken the entire project and we've said, these are the 920 things that have to be done for this site to be clean and releasable. And we've said, what's it going to cost to do each and every one of these 920 items? And then we've committed, as part of our filings with the NRC and the state, that for each of those items, we will take precisely the amount of money that we say needs to be used to do that work. So if the work costs $1 million and the pay item, as we call it, is $500,000, we only take $500,000. The sum of all 920 items is less than the amount of money in the trust fund. So we can never take more money to do an element of the work than the amount of money assigned for that element of the work. What's been done in the past, where projects have had cost overruns, which the owner has had to take They've not done it that way. They've just said, okay, this project, or this piece of the work cost $1 million, I'll take $1 million out, when in fact the budget was $500,000. For us, the budget is the cost. There's never a variance from that, and we've committed to that as part of the way we do this. So, you know, technically speaking, you can't take money out without doing the work. So the trust fund can never be depleted without the work being done. That's just a feature of the way we're doing this, and a way of doing it that's never been done before. But in my opinion, the right way to do it, because you don't pilfer the trust fund and take all the money out and leave a contaminated site. So that's the assurance mechanism that we have. But ultimately, the owner is responsible for the cleanup of the site, the licensee/owner.
So in the event that what you've just shared with us, for any possible reason, fails to materialize, who is on the hook for paying to clean up the remaining site?
The owner.
The
Who is the current owner?
North Star?
No,
Well, the plant owner is Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee, LLC. That's who owns the plant today. If the transaction is approved, that company will become a subsidiary of part of North Star's group. And so the company will be the same. It will just be a different ultimate owner. And so there's no real change in the obligation of the owner of the facility, which is Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee LLC. They're going to change the name of that company to North Star Vermont Yankee LLC, I believe, when we're done. And so I think to get to your question is, how do you get up the chain? Can you get up the chain? I think the explanation that Scott just gave is that your hypothetical, that the money's been taken out of the trust before the work is done, is not possible, because the commitment they're making is they're not going to take any money out of the trust fund unless the work is done. And so the next question is, what if the project doesn't go along the way it's supposed to? There is a series of laws, as you will know, about which companies are responsible in a family of companies, and that analysis is going to be the same whether we own Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee or Scott's companies own North Star Vermont Yankee LLC. And so I don't know how to answer that question better than to say there are laws on that effect, but I'm not prepared to describe those tonight. Well, I will add this. The financial assurance package is the key issue, or one of the key issues, that the NRC is going to evaluate in deciding whether to transfer the license. And it is one of the key issues that the Public Service Board is going to evaluate before it allows the transfer to take place. So if we can't satisfy the Public Service Board, which will have input from all of the interveners, or we can't satisfy the NRC, then the transaction won't be approved. And as I mentioned earlier, we need approval from both. This is not just a case where the NRC can say yes and the state can say no, and we're okay. We need the state to say yes also after the hearing process, which will extend through the rest of the year and possibly into next.
So, if there are indeed rules to cover the situation, if the best efforts do not come to pass, then my question would be, if this deal is signed and there are rules in place by the NRC which determine who is responsible, is there any guarantee that the NRC will not do what it has done in the past, which is after Vermonters have made a deal, the NRC has changed the rules, after the deal, and applied the new rules to the previous agreement? Is there any way that we can get from the NRC, a deal is made, we know who the default payers are, in case it doesn't go through, that the NRC will not change the rules after the deal is made?
Senator, I know you you've raised this issue in numerous forums and under numerous
I've
conditions.
witnessed it happening numerous times.
Well, and in fairness, there were certain rules that Vermont changed after we bought the plan, but I don't think this is the place to have that debate. I will say that the rules about the responsibility of the owner of the facility apply equally, whether we own it or North Star owns it. It's the same set of rules. It doesn't matter whether Exelon or NextEra or Dominion or anybody else owns a nuclear plant. There is one set of rules, and those rules of ownership and responsibility will apply if we're the owner, and the same rules will apply if they're the owner. That's the best answer I can give you.
You haven't told us who's financially responsible.
The
Under
owner.
the rules,
The owner.
that you say replace.
No, the owner of the facility is responsible.
Can I interrupt briefly?
Who has to pick up
We
the
have,
tab?
the Nuclear Decommissioning
Main
Trust
Yankee
Fund is
is
the
up.
asset.
It's recently come to our attention that Toshiba in Japan is going bankrupt because of cost overruns in the southeast United States. I understand, I'd imagine that Westinghouse plays by the same NRC rules. And the question from the gentleman over here is, what if you run out of the money? What if you go bankrupt? This is happening. This is happening to other honorable, reputable countries, corporations, and they're going belly up. And the question is, I'm sure you have rules, but what happened? There is a long-standing history of significant cost overruns in the nuclear power industry. The notion that you can do this at cost seems to be pie in the sky based upon previous performance.
Okay, the issue with Toshiba or Westinghouse, more specifically in the United States, is related to construction of nuclear power plants in the southeast, correct? That's, I believe, what you're referring to, sir. And you know, this project, there's a very significant difference between constructing and deconstructing. In construction, there's a significant variability in cost, and the issues that are related to that specific situation, there's a massive dispute between Chicago Bridge and Iron and Westinghouse about a transaction that was done between them where essentially $1 billion of working capital wasn't as anticipated according to Westinghouse. So their bankruptcy doesn't really have anything to do with the nuclear project. It has to do with a issue they have with a transaction they did with another company.
Well, usually you're having a transaction between two countries, and I'm sure there's differences, but everybody who's torn apart, worked on an old house knows there's problems unforeseeable. And what I hear you're saying is that you're reassuring us collectively that you've gone through your checkpoint of 952 items and you've nailed everything, and we're to believe that.
What I'm telling you is that we've broken the project down into 900 plus items, doing work like we've done in thousands of other projects. Let me just maybe describe how we view this project. This project is broken down into a few different phases. And most people that do decommissioning projects will tell you that the most cost-sensitive or risk phase of the project is removing spent fuel from the plant to the dry fuel storage system, the ISPAC. That's not part of our project. Entergy is doing that now with their own money, and that will all be done before we ever own the site. The next most significant risk factor is removal of the reactor vessel, the internals, segmenting those, cutting those, and sending those to a waste disposal site. Our partner, Areva, which is owned 80% by the French government, is going to do that work on a pre-negotiated and agreed to fixed price contract. They will do that work for a guaranteed price. So we take that element out of the cost structure. So what's left is a large site, or actually, in our opinion, not a large site, but what appears to be a large site. And if you look at that site today, what do you see? You see some cooling towers, you see a large building with a lot of concrete in it, you see an atmospheric tower, you see some small buildings. We take down structures and buildings like that all day, every day, all across the United States. The most significant cost component left is disposal of radioactive waste. We've looked at the site and we've said, okay, we're going to characterize this entire site the whole site as radioactive waste, even though 80% of it is not. We'll characterize it all that way, and we're going to calculate a cost to ship all of that material to Texas to the disposal facility. So all of the cost of the entire site being radiological is already captured. So now what's left in terms of cost to do the decommissioning? It's the labor to do the work. And the significant labor on this job, or the significant work element, is removal of the reactor building. And that's largely concrete. So what I wanted to show you tonight is some video and other things of concrete processing jobs that we've done. We've processed hundreds of millions of tons of concrete, hundreds of times more concrete than you have in that site. So we have a really good idea what it takes to process concrete, rubblize it, put it on rail cars and ship it somewhere. So, in terms of cost certainty, we have a very, very high degree of comfort that we've captured all of the costs in these 920 items. We might not be right on this item and this item and this item, but where we're high here, we're low here, we aren't assuming that we're going to do the project and not make any money. There's a 10% contingency on everything. So take 10% on $600 million, that's $60 million of contingency. So if we're high here, we've got some money available to true everything up. But that's the overall plan.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Because I think you may need it.
Okay, is this working?
It is.
My name is Chris Williams. I live in Hancock, Vermont, and I've been watching Vermont Yankee for some time, and one of the recurring themes over the years has been where we are, the school. You've taken apart tens of thousands of corrupted sites and industrial sites and brownfields and so on and so forth. Have you thought about the proximity of this elementary school to your site? And is that taken into account in any of your cost estimates and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. We take into account proximity of humans and structures and all kinds of things.
Little humans?
Little humans.
All right.
We like little humans. I have little humans.
Okay.
We're not interested in doing a project that's unsafe for the public nor for our workers. The way the work gets done on a project like this is there's a very substantial containment around these structures that maintains. If you're working in certain environments where you've got asbestos and that type of thing, we set up containments for negative air where the airflow is into rather than out of a given structure. So we evaluate all of that. We aren't going to have releases of materials. And remember, we're not talking about, in my opinion, a nuclear power plant. We're talking about a radiologically contaminated site. Well, when you talk about a radiologically contaminated site, the first thing you go to is what's the source term? What's the curies of material? Well, when you take the spent fuel out and you put it in, you weld it into cans and put it in concrete bunkers and set it over here, it's like 95% of your source term. You take the vessel, the internals, the torus, those big mechanical components out, all of that's done while the containment's all there, the structure's all there, there's no openings. Now you're at 99+% of your source term is gone from the plant. The level of residual radioactivity inside that facility at that point in time is very easily identified. You know exactly where it's going to be because the material in there that's radioactive is really from primarily two sources. One is activation, where if you think about how a nuclear reactor works, you've got neutrons flying around, splitting uranium atoms, making heat, but some of them get out of the reactor vessel and they hit concrete and that activates the concrete, and there's isotopes inside that concrete that are radioactive or in metal that are radioactive. Those things are all easy to find because they have to be in a pathway where a neutron, which moves in a straight line, could hit them. So you know where the significant activation components are inside the plant. The other place you have contamination is if you've had leaks or exposures or water that had radioactivity in it soaking into concrete, that type of thing. And again, radioactive material is pretty easy to find. You can do it with a meter. Ionizing radiation has been tracked and managed for years. So we can find and diminish the levels of radioactive material. And the way these projects work is you continually peel back the onion skin and remove source term to the maximum level you can for, number one, exposure to your workers, and number two, risk to the outside populace if, you know, something went wrong kinds of scenarios.
Have you ever dismantled something, even if it's not radioactive, on a large scale that requires rubblization of concrete and so forth, that's this close to an elementary school?
You know, I'm not going to say we have or we haven't. We've done like 50,000
find out?
projects. I can certainly find out.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, part of the work we do in the radiological or nuclear space is we do removal of research reactors at universities. And I can tell you personally, my first project like this was 1992 at UCLA, where I took a nuclear reactor out of Bolter Hall, for anybody that's from UCLA, right in the middle of campus.
But
Classrooms.
you didn't tear the building down, huh?
We left the building, and that space today is a classroom.
Okay.
We didn't have any contamination. So it's not little ones, it's bigger ones, but, you know.
I just appreciate you getting back to the community as to what you've taken into account with regard to this facility as you plan to move forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we probably have time for another question, and we've got it right here.
Hi, I'm Susan Lance. I'm from Northampton, Massachusetts. I want to follow up a little bit further because I'm beginning to hear a little bit of threat of something which upsets me. I've been dealing with Vermont Yankee for many years now in one form or another, basically as part of the Shut It Down Affinity group that spent a lot of time across the street blocking the gates. I'm very disturbed by what I heard the senator, I believe he was referred to, trying to get at. I think it's only human to think that estimates can go wrong. You've been very good about outlining how careful you are about the amount of money and whatever. However, it can go wrong. And then I hear, all right, who owns this company? And I hear the Entergy saying North Star, and it's the same if Entergy owned it or North Star owned it. But when pressed as to who would be responsible for human error in the cost, I hear something about an LLC that seems to be affiliated probably with the state of Vermont in some way or something, or I don't hear anyone taking direct ownership of this company as the two of you bandy around this term of ownership. Because in my mind, if somebody owns something, they're the ultimate responsible person for things that go wrong.
Right, and let me try to clarify. When Entergy bought Vermont Yankee in 2002, the owner of that facility, the day after...
Truth to us? You've lied to us before, sir. Are you sure you didn't make North Star?
That's enough.
When we bought the plant in 2002, the company that owned Vermont Yankee the day after the sale closed was Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee LLC. That was approved by the Public Service Board, it was approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and that's been the owner for 15 years.
Okay, what does that mean?
It's a company. It's just a different...
Who are the components of the company?
It's a company that is, it's a form of organization that a corporation can create that has ownership interest in assets. And I don't know how much detail to go into on this, but that company has owned Vermont Yankee for the last 15 years. What we are proposing in this transaction is to sell that company.
Why?
To North Star.
Why?
And North Star is going to take over the decommissioning
They don't
of
have
the
to own it
project.
to decommission
So
it.
why then, if something goes wrong with the estimates that North Star has carefully lined for this decommissioning, why is not North Star going to be responsible for filling in the gaps?
Well, yeah. So the regulatory process, as it's constructed by the NRC, obligates the licensee, the owner, to perform the decommissioning and to have the funds to do so. So the method we're using to do that is called the prepaid method, and that requires that there be enough money based on estimates to do that work. In addition to that, we've committed resources from the parent company, North Star Group Services, of $125 million for cost overruns that could occur, even though our estimates are our best estimate is what we really expect. We have committed $125 million under a support agreement to provide additional support to make sure the project gets done.
So your cost estimate total of $861 million or something like that, you have an extra above and beyond that, $125 million?
I can't answer that specific. Let me break that down for you. The cost estimate to do the decommissioning, to remove the plant and greenfield the site, is about $600 million. I think $611 million, if I recall. There's an additional couple $100 million associated with providing security for the dry fuel storage system that sits there because the Department of Energy has to come and take that nuclear fuel away someday. That's another couple $100 million that the DOE pays back to us on an annual basis. So the $600 million to decommission the plant and terminate the license has an additional $125 million on top of that. The other piece is a reimbursement. If DOE doesn't come for 100 years, that $200 million cost to support spent fuel would be $1 billion. It's annual reimbursement. We have to just put in place an expected time when the DOE would come and take that material. But we don't control that. We can't move spent nuclear fuel from the site. It's something we can't do.
I'm sorry, the Public Service Board, I believe, is here and probably ready to start their hearing, and we are past 7 o'clock. If I could, I would like to take just 30 more seconds and correct an omission of mine. The Department of Public Service is not the only state agency involved in looking carefully at this deal. Other state agencies are parties to the docket and involved, particularly the Agency of Natural Resources.
You gotta hold it down or something.
The Attorney General's office is also a party, and the Department of Health is very involved in looking at this transaction as well.
Still not working.
So, well,
There you go.
how about if I just yell?
You can make it work.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this has been a really interesting discussion, and I thank people for their participation. And please stick around and give your comments to the Public Service Board.
And
Thank
I'd
you.
like to thank the Department of Public Service for hosting this, and I'd like to thank everybody for the good questions.
Again, thank you for being here. We are the Vermont Public Service Board, and this is a public hearing. It's not part of the information session that you were just participating in. This is the public hearing part, and we are the Public Service Board. In case number 8880, on the joint petition of North Star Decommissioning Holdings, LLC, North Star Nuclear Decommissioning Company, LLC, North Star Group Services, Inc., Parent Corporation, North Star Group Holdings, LLC, Entergy Nuclear Vermont Investment Company, LLC, and Entergy Nuclear Operations, Inc., and any other necessary affiliated entities to transfer ownership of Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee, LLC, and for certain ancillary approvals pursuant to 30 VSA Sections 107, 231, and 232. I'm Margaret Cheney, a member of the Vermont Public Service Board, and with me tonight is my fellow board member, Sarah Hoffman. Our chairman, Jim Volz, was not able to be with us tonight. The purpose of this hearing is to provide an opportunity to hear input from the public regarding this joint petition. In this case, the board will be determining among other things, whether to approve a proposed indirect transfer of ownership of the Vermont Yankee nuclear plant by the Entergy Group to North Star Decommissioning Holdings, as well as proposed site restoration standards. This is the first of 2 public hearings that the board has scheduled in Vernon with respect to this case. A second public hearing is currently scheduled for early September after all the parties have had the opportunity to conduct discovery and file testimony in this case. These public hearings are not the only opportunity or only forum for input. We also welcome letters and emails, as well as comments submitted through the board's new electronic filing system, which we call EPSB. There is a handout available at both ends of the table that provides specific information about how to submit comments about this case by email, mail, and through EPSB. Tonight's public hearing will be transcribed by a court reporter, and this transcript, along with all other comments received by the board, become part of the case's public file so that board members, staff, and the participants in the case can consider the comments. Public comments are very important to us in raising new issues or perspectives that the board should consider. And these comments are sometimes the basis for questions that we raise with parties during the evidentiary hearings that will take place this fall. Additional information about this case is publicly available on our website through EPSB. The website address for EPSB is listed on the handout at both ends of the table, as well as instructions for obtaining access to such information. As you know, the joint petitioners and the Vermont Department of Public Service and other parties to this case have representatives here tonight. You may have heard from some of them during the information session earlier this evening. However, the purpose of this section of the evening, this public hearing, is for us to hear from the public. It is not a back and forth, it is for us to hear from you and not from the parties or their representatives. So we will now open the floor for public comment. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please put your name on the sign-up sheet. I have one here. There was also another one going around the room. And we will call on you in turn. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name clearly for the court reporter, and if necessary, please spell it for her. Thank you. The first person I have is Brad Furland.
Very good. Good evening. My name is Brad Furland, and I serve as president of the Vermont Energy Partnership. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in favor and support of the sale of Vermont Yankee to North Star. The Vermont Energy Partnership was formed in January of 2005, largely through the foresight of Governor Thomas P. Salmon. We are comprised of a diverse group of business, labor, and community leaders. Along with advocating for safe, reliable, affordable, and clean energy, we also advocate for a strong economy and the development of good-paying jobs in Vermont. The correlation between low-cost clean energy and a strong economy has been at the core of our values and mission. Over the years, the Vermont Energy Partnership was a strong advocate for the continued operation of Vermont Yankee. The 600 jobs, the low-cost and clean baseload power supplying a third of Vermont's demand was a tremendous asset to the Vermont economy and more than significant economic engine for Vernon and Windham County. We felt it was very unfortunate for Vermont to lose VY and for Southern Vermont to lose this tremendous business asset. Our impression of Vermont politics at that time was not flattering or healthy for Vermont's economy or reputation as a place to do business. One of the calls to action we heard if Vermont Yankee was to shut down was that it should be decommissioned in some accelerated fashion. Make the site available for future uses. What Vermont Yankee has as a standard decommissioning practice is safe store, a process that could take 40 to 60 years. So we view this new opportunity of having Vermont Yankee acquired by North Star and have them put in place an accelerated and safe decommissioning process as great news for Vermont. We have had the opportunity to meet with North Star officials and hear explanations of how they plan to operate in Vermont and decommission Vermont Yankee. The workflow and process as experts at decommissioning is exciting both in terms of a timeline, but also for the economic boost it will bring to Windham County. We hope the microphone works.
And if you don't have the microphone, don't speak.
We hope upon hope that as North Star is properly vetted by this process in a fair, reasonable, and timely manner, that a green light is given to this sale and it signals to all you can do business in Vermont.
All right, the next person on the list is Deborah Katz.
So I want to thank you for, I hope it's working.
It is now.
Okay.
Begin to it.
So I want to thank you for coming down to hear us. I'm Deborah Katz. I'm the Executive Director of the Citizens Awareness Network. We have over 2,000 members in the tri-state community concerned with the decommissioning of this reactor. And actually has been involved as an intervener in the cleanup of Yankee Row and Connecticut Yankee and won a lawsuit against the NRC in terms of the illegal decommissioning of Row. And so we've had some experience dealing with decommissioning. What is being proposed is a radical change in decommissioning. What has happened before is either a utility has cleaned up a site, or in the case of the Zion reactors, the license has been transferred, but it has been returned to the licensee, in that case, Exelon. This will be the first commercial reactor where the license is transferred and remains transferred. And although North Star sounds, hi. Although North Star sounds really good, and I would like to believe this because it sounds so good, but things that sound so good don't always work out so well. So this is a corporation that's talking about cleaning up a large-scale nuclear reactor, and that's not a small potato. I mean, they've done research reactors, but those are 6, 10, 12 megawatts, not over 600 megawatts. And they talk about using AREVA to do the internals work. Well, AREVA right now is under investigation for forgery and, in fact, manufacturing substandard parts. It is owned by France, and now France is investigating them. So there are real questions about AREVA's work. They are potentially going bankrupt. And so you're having a corporation coming in that is on a fixed cost structure. And there is always a question when there's a fixed cost that safety will be compromised. So they'll come up with the budget that they have to meet, but it doesn't mean that the cleanup will be as good. Those are one of the concerns in this.
Jenny, it's not owned by France. It's owned by EDF, which is only 85% owned by France.
Thank you. Men, they always have to correct women. Women are talking and men just can't keep their mouths shut. So, what has been said by nuclear corporations before this is that this is an iterative process. That as you begin decommissioning, even though they have a wonderful list of 1,000 different things that have to get done, when you start cleaning up the reactor, what was found at Yankee Row and Connecticut Yankee were levels of groundwater contamination, millions of curies that were unexpected. So that the issue of their laying out a scheme of how to do it is really good, but it doesn't take in the fact that they may find contamination that is completely unexpected that will take them way over budget. Yankee Row cost $39 million to build. It cost over $700 million to clean up, and that does not include putting the high-level waste on a pad. I also want to talk about the issue of how North Star is raising the idea of suing the DOE, basically, to pay for the guardianship of the waste and claiming it as an asset. This is a lawsuit, it has not even started, and there was in fact a lawsuit, I think at Surrey in 2000, to attempt to get the DOE to pay for guardianship of the waste, and it was rejected by the court. So there is no guarantee that in fact North Star will win this lawsuit. And then they will have to come up with $5 million a year. In Roe, in Connecticut Yankee, at Maine Yankee, the ratepayers, we are paying $5 million a year to babysit the waste. But there's no utility. There's no rate base to go back to. The question becomes, with a corporation that has so little financial backup to begin with, where will it get the money to do that job? And I just want to stress this notion that, in fact, North Star may reach its budget. It may hold to its budget. But what you may wind up with is a dirty cleanup. What you may wind up with, in fact, is having a brown field at Vermont Yankee, where it doesn't have to meet the 15 millirem standard of Vermont or the 25 millirem standard of the NRC, but the 100 millirem standard for a brown field under the NRC. In fact, Yankee Row and Connecticut Yankee have still not been released for unrestricted use, and they have had all the ratepayer funds they needed to get those sites cleaned up. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Asher Crisp.
Hello, Asher Crisp from Danby, Vermont. I happen to be a technology futurist, so it's very interesting to hear about some of the concerns that are coming up about this particular cleanup proposal.
You tip your microphone higher.
Yes. Okay. Is that better? Okay. Can people hear me?
Speak into it.
All right. So it's very interesting to hear the concerns that people are bringing up with the cleanup. I'd like to first of all say unequivocally that I'm very much in favor of this deal. That the faster that we can accelerate the cleanup, the faster that we can repurpose this space, which I think is very valuable. Having grown up in Brattleboro in particular, I see the long-term economic benefit and the short-term economic benefit from having this accomplished right away. In terms of the concerns over margins and costs, I think that those considerations looking at the past are often justified. However, what people often neglect to understand is that technology today is growing at an exponential pace, and that more is different, and also we can do more with less as we move forward. And from where I stand, I think that there are technologies that are just on the threshold of commercialization that will actually enable cleanup of facilities like this in the near future, within the time horizon that North Star is talking, to be accomplished even more economical ways. So if anything, the margins are probably going to grow, not shrink, even if unexpected things show up because of technological innovation. So I urge people to look a little bit broader when it comes to their concerns. And the next 10 years are going to be nothing like the last 10 years. Things are moving much, much faster in every area of technology, including material science, including things related to the decommissioning of nuclear power plants. And I think that this will probably come in under budget rather than over budget as a result of these innovation efforts. So I strongly recommend that this deal be able to go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Michael Granger.
Thank you. I'm probably going to hit on a common theme here, and I think, you know, for skeptics, you realize quickly whenever you do anything that Murphy works overtime on any kind of project, and cost overrun, time overrun is pretty standard. So you look at the North Star's 952 items, and what some of the literature, the license transfer application seems to imply is that they will be getting a performance bond. Then there's other times where they're saying, in one application, it's said that it's likely that they will get a performance bond for the majority of the work. That doesn't seem to be defined as to whether or not that includes radioactive or just physical performance. And if you look into performance bonds, they're non-existent or extremely rare for nuclear power plants. They're common for wind, they're common for solar, they're common for natural gas, and in fact, they're mostly insisted upon when a plant is constructed. But as far as I know, there is no performance bond, especially for radionuclides included. I would argue that it's likely that they are excluded in a performance bond. So now you get down to the statement that North Star made tonight, and that is they're willing to put up $125 million, and their literature also says that in the unlikely event that they can't get an acceptable performance bond for the majority of the work, they'll put up $125,000. Quick math on that is 15% on the $811 million that they're estimating. Most projects I advise people on, I tell them 1.25 to 1.3, even when you really licked your pencil. So I would argue that the board or their professionals should maybe look into whether or not the 125 is acceptable and or whether or not performance bonds are even available. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Ben Kinsley, I believe.
Hi, my name is Ben Kinsley. I'm Executive Director of Campaign for Vermont Prosperity. We're a statewide policy development and advocacy group that's dedicated to creating prosperity for all Vermonters. I, like many of you, am primarily here to learn more about what this merger means and what this potential opportunity for Southern Vermont might be. We realize that there is little public trust in some of the parties involved, but we believe that there are potential real benefits for Southern Vermont from an accelerated decommissioning. This plan deserves thorough vetting and consideration for both public safety and economic impact. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think I'll start also saying the next name so that the next speaker could be ready. Up immediately next is Christopher Williams, and after him will be Tim Smith.
Good evening. You got this? Working?
Yeah.
My name is Christopher Williams. I live in Hancock, Vermont, and I've been following Yankee and the various policies regarding Yankee that have floated through the legislature and before the board for quite some time. And I have to say, I would really like to see this plant cleaned up sooner rather than later. I really want to see the cleanup done in a superb way, in a Vermont way. I want to see it better than any cleanup has been done to date in this country. That said, I have to let you know that as I hear the proposal from North Star and the responses from Entergy, I think back to 2007 and the proposal that was named by Entergy as SpinCo. They later said that that was just like a placeholder name for the proposal to basically put this plant, when it was operating, into a separate company that was completely cut off from its parent corporation. And very much undercapitalized proposal. As I hear the proposal from North Star and Entergy regarding the plant and its license, and the plan not to give the license back to Entergy at the time that decommissioning is complete or not complete. What I hear is, or what I think of, is a transfer of liability, a way to get out from under liability, and that concerns me greatly. And I'm not going to belabor it, and I'll be speaking more after all of the evidence and your hearings have taken place. But when you look at the history of nuclear decommissioning in this country, regardless of the march of technology or the incredible spreadsheet that can be put together, the history is cost overruns, serious cost overruns. And on top of those cost overruns, the other feature that really sticks out is sites that are seriously more impaired with pollutants, radioactive and otherwise. Those are the plants that have serious cost overruns. And unlike Maine Yankee, unlike Zion in Illinois, to name two, we have a seriously impaired site here, and we've known that since at least 2009 or 2010 was when the truth came out. So I appreciate the job that you have to do, and we'll be watching, and do it diligently, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Tim Smith, and following Tim Smith will be Leslie Sullivan-Sykes.
Thank you. My name is Tim Smith. I'm with Franklin County Industrial Development Corporation. I've been in this position for 17 years. Obviously, our mission is to create an environment for job retention, job creation, and capital investment. And I'm one of 12 RDCs from around the state, and I'm speaking specifically for Franklin County Industrial Development. I hesitated coming tonight because I didn't feel that this may be more of a regional discussion than a statewide discussion. But the more I thought about it, this is a conversation that's been going on for as long as I can remember, and probably many in the audience. And I think it's time that we probably put this to bed so that my children don't have to worry about this conversation. It's been a contentious conversation for years. It's been contentious in the State House. It's been contentious in this region. And I think it's time, if we have the opportunity, which there is a proposal on the table, that we should move forward. Obviously, we encourage proper vetting of North Star. We think there's obviously an economic impact. You know, if you look at the state's budget, of which we've been running a deficit for a number of years, our general budget, for the most part, is 65% of it is created by income tax, sales tax, room and meals tax, and corporate income tax. We have an opportunity in the short run to impact that state budget with this closure and the jobs that will be created in the short run. And hopefully, we'll be able to create jobs in the long run as well. You know, it's an issue that I know it's a hot issue, but it's one that we have the potential to put behind us. When we were talking about this in the State House 5 years ago, the closure time was 2045, 2060, but now we have time to shorten that and move forward and move beyond this. And that's what I would encourage you to do, is to take a serious look at this proposal, vet it properly as you would anything, and I encourage you to, if it fits, let's move forward and put this behind us. Thank you.
Leslie Sullivan Sachs, and following Leslie will be Bob Spencer.
Hi, my name is Leslie Sullivan Sachs. I live in Brattleboro, Vermont, and I'm with the Safe and Green campaign. I want to thank you for coming down here from Montpelier, and I really want to thank you for scheduling 2 hearings so that you can get a gist of what our concerns are early on, and then after there's more evidence, and hear from us again to see how our concerns may have changed. I'm an agnostic. I do very strongly believe that it is the responsibility of our generation to clean up this site. We're the generation, whether we were for nuclear energy or against nuclear energy, we're the generation that created the waste and that created the contamination. At the same time, I'm worried about Vermont being a guinea pig. So I look forward to your fully vetting all aspects of this sale proposal. I've been to many NDCAP meetings when the PSDAR was going on and when the settlement agreement was going on, and I've been to every meeting since the sale was announced. And I would just give you a little piece of advice, which is please don't forget when the companies are using generic language that what they're actually doing is talking about high-level nuclear waste and other contaminants, cesium and strontium-90 and PCBs and asbestos and other toxins. It gets very easy to get lulled in. I mean, I heard a whole 20 minutes on moving the spent fuel from the pool into the dry casks, which not once would you have known that they weren't just moving cans of tomatoes around. So it's very easy to get lulled into and forget what we're actually talking about here. I also, earlier this evening, the fellow from North Star, when asked a direct question about how many nuclear power plants they had decommissioned, he kind of slid right by, well, North Star and Ariva, when North Star's only decommissioned 4 university lab ones, and Ariva is the one pulling the heavy weight. So I'm sure you know this, but you have to be really cautious and keep asking the hard questions. We don't know about, I don't know anyways, and I haven't heard from the handicap meetings, what about the structure of this, this dream team, this team of 4 partners, and has North Star ever coordinated a team of 4 partners of this magnitude before? I guess the last piece of advice, or what I would really love to see from the PSB, is that we take this opportunity for North Star to prove itself to the industry as being the new wave of decommissioning, as being a leader in decommissioning, by having the strongest standards, really Vermont green standards, that we could possibly have. And then have them follow through and do that over really strong, transparent processes that include oversight by the state and by the NRC. Have them work with all the interveners also as partners in the PSB process, rather than to see them as adversaries, and put together the strongest plan that you can for Vermont. And then do it, and then North Star will come out smelling like a rose and have a great business. So I would encourage you to just keep in mind that that could be a goal, as opposed to something that every step of the way we try to get the standards lower and lower and lower. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Bob Spencer, followed by Zach Kozig, I believe the name is.
Hi, I'm Bob Spencer. I'm chairman of the Vernon Planning and Economic Development Commission, and we really appreciate you coming to Vernon, so we don't have to drive all the way to Brattleboro. Anyway, no, it's also a great opportunity for our residents to have an up-close opportunity to get to know our biggest regulatory partner. So thank you. I want to just point out that Vernon has a over 100-year history as an energy producing community, starting with the hydroelectric facility here on the river, reaching across to New Hampshire, and then of course 40 years of Vermont Yankee. And we actually have a lot of support in this town for more energy production. And we would like to see the site eventually redeveloped for energy production. And we've had a number of meetings with major energy players and planners throughout Vermont that we have a vision of repurposing this site into a microgrid, alternative energy generation sources, whether it be a combination of hydroelectric, battery storage, solar, anaerobic digestion, not wind, it's too low, and perhaps some other new technologies that were mentioned as possibilities tonight. It's almost an ideal site with the Velcro grid, interconnect, the substation, and the access to the river power. So in light of that, we have recently received a grant from the state of Vermont to update our town plan. And the primary purpose of that will be to facilitate the redevelopment of this site consistent with town policies and goals. And we're working with Wyndham Regional Commission on that grant. We've retained their services. We also have been selected as a model energy planning town, one of 3 in Wyndham County, and again, working with Wyndham Regional to look at giving preferential, I forget the term that they're using for this, if you have an energy plan. Well, it's a nice bureaucratic term, but if you have, it's like a preferential, if you have a solid plan, then either against or for different energy projects, you get extra points in the Public Service Board. So we are, you should know that term. Something like a deferential treatment, but we just started. Chris, what is it?
Substantial deference.
What is it?
Substantial deference.
Substantial deference, thank you. That was close.
We knew what you meant.
Yes. So we appreciate people from outside of town having concerns, but believe me, there's no greater concern of what happens right here, right across the street, than right here tonight. I also want to just sort of toot the horn of the Vernon Planning and Economic Development Commission. We have 7 members. It was restructured 2 years ago to go from 5 to 7 to give us more expertise and breadth. We have on the board an energy development financing specialist. We have a corporate executive. We have a dairy farmer. We have a newspaper publisher and editor. We have a marketing specialist. I'm an environmental planner and a specialist in waste management myself. And we come to this with the intention of helping the town get the very best possible deal out of this. We are thrilled initially with the North Star proposal. It's almost too good to be true, as we've heard, that 10, 13 years from now, the site could be released for redevelopment, development of multi-million-dollar businesses utilizing the site, generating jobs, generating revenue for taxes. So we have a huge stake here, and we have filed as an intervener. We have intervener status. We will be commenting as appropriate to the various dockets. We don't have anything to comment on yet. It's all just, a proposal. But so far, we're very excited about this prospect. It's almost, we hadn't anticipated that. So our goal is to see that the town plan is consistent with the future development of that site, that we have status and deferential,
Substantial deference.
substantial deference when whatever's proposed. So we thank you very much, and we appreciate everyone coming here and the interest people express in this project. It's very important for the whole state and the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Zach Hazard, and followed by him is Josh. It looks like unruly, but I probably have
My name is Zach Hozid. I live in Tunbridge, Vermont, and I'm a third-year law student at Vermont Law School. I'm doing some research on this project and ongoing effects. I have 2 points to make. The first is related to the feasibility of the project, and the second relates to financial and legal liability. So to the first point of the feasibility, I did a little bit of research on the process they're going to, Northstar is going to use to decommission this site, and I haven't found that process done anywhere else. And I also did some research into scientific articles and couldn't find anything on that as well there. So I think before this process is approved, there should make sure that it's either been done before and it worked, or if it hasn't been done, that it is totally feasible and it is possible. And that it can work. And I think the burden should be on Northstar to show that it can work and could work. I think also to make sure that this process continues to work throughout, it should be open and transparent, as Northstar said earlier today that it will be. And to make sure that it is open and transparent, I think there should be continuous monitoring and reporting on the part of Northstar, and making those reports open to the public, and to have a penalty assessed if they do not comply with that. And this could be similar to any sort of standard permit for pollution, where they have to monitor and report themselves, and if they don't, then there's a penalty assessed. And it could perhaps be some sort of citizen suit, part of that, where a citizen could sue them if they don't follow through on their obligations. The second point of financial and legal accountability, they need to make sure that this project is affordable, and they've said earlier today that they've made thoroughly make sure that they can do what they're going to do. And I think they need to have thorough plans that are just as thorough, if not more thorough, for in case things don't work out, to have a plan B, C, D, E, F that are just as thorough as their primary plan of doing things. Perhaps on the financial responsibility, one suggestion could be to have them put sort of their own trust fund or their own account in case the decommissioning fund does run out for some reason, that they have money already set aside that can come in and take that place if need be. That way there's always some money that is available in case things go wrong. And then finally, there should be some sort of way to keep Entergy on the hook, at least to some extent, in case things go wrong. Thank you.
Can you just spell your last name?
Sorry?
Can you just spell your last name?
H-O-Z-I-D.
Thank you. Next, we have Josh, and following Josh, we have Guy Page.
I'm Josh Unruh. I'm the select board chair here in the town of Vernon.
Can you spell your last name?
It's U-N-R-U-H. So to reiterate what Bob Spencer just said, there's nobody that has a stronger stake in this sale than the town of Vernon. I stand tonight to support the sale of Vermont Yankee to Northstar. I've had the opportunity to meet with Northstar executives regarding this purchase and their potential new partnership with the town of Vernon. Through these discussions, my personal questions and concerns have been put to rest. I'm no scientist and certainly no internet scientist. So I put my trust in the people that deal in this industry day in and day out, and that will govern the sale and demolition. To get this land back to usable state is paramount for Vernon and Windham County for economic development. To not allow this sale is further cutting the town of Vernon off at its knees. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Guy Page, and following Guy Page is John Field.
Good evening, and thank you for coming down.
you know, I'm finding myself agreeing with an awful lot of what I'm hearing. You know, Chris Williams, you're absolutely right. Diligence. Yeah. Jim Smith, you know, this is a statewide issue, and Bob and the other folks from Vernon, this is also very much a Vernon thing, and Vernon's energy vision is really exciting. I think of, you know, decommissioning is really an integral part of energy generation. I used to be a roofer, and what I would tell our roofing crews is, the job isn't done when all the shingles are on the roof. The job is done when all the nails are picked up off the ground and all the stray pieces of shingle are safely taken away. That's when the job is done. So, you know, I really think the idea of a thorough, well-considered plan for decommissioning is, I know you guys are, I know what I'm saying, you guys, the Public Service Board has the expertise and the process to do that. So I believe that that's going to happen. And I hope with all that you will be able to get to yes. Because yes is good for the environment and for the economy of Vermont. And not just Windham County, it really is for all of Vermont. Windham County is not an island. We're all connected. The economic aspect, according to the Brattleboro Group study, the economic impact for Vermont is, of just the decommissioning work, $781 million is the sort of the middle ground estimate for that. Well, from positive economic impact, that's a good thing. The environmental is even more clear. The low-level radioactive material will be gone, you know what, maybe 10, 15 years? That's, you know, compared to 60 years, that's great. And also the possibilities of possibly more prompt removal of the high-level waste is really exciting. We've got Waste Control Systems as part of the team here. Waste Control Systems is the applicant right now for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for a repository in Andrews County, Texas. And the current Secretary of Energy is a former governor of Texas, Rick Perry. So, and also, of course, Vermont and Texas are part of this waste control compact. So the stars are aligning, I think, much more than they were a couple years ago for the high-level waste also to be taken out of Vermont. If there's anything we do all agree on, boy, that we all want that. So, yes, be careful, be thorough, but don't shy away from vision, because vision is part of Vernon's history. It was 100 years ago. 7 businessmen in Brattleboro said, we need a generating dam in the Connecticut, in Vernon, and we're going to use a modern design, a concrete design sunk into bedrock when everything else was rocks with like crib dams. That was the accepted design. They said, no, we're going to take it to the next level. And a new modern, at the time, design, turbine design as well. And 100 years, more than 100 years later, that dam is actually still licensed to operate. And it's just been purchased. So a success story there. 50 years ago, Vernon took the chance to host VY, and you know, incredible jobs, economic benefit, emissions-free equivalent with hydro, solar, and wind per kilowatt, an absolute fact. Okay? Thank you. And so in that sense, you know, this has been a real win. And now there's the next level, which is the microgrid. And again, an idea that people aren't all that familiar with, but our utilities are on board with, and Vernon has a chance 3 times in really 100 years to be trendsetters in energy generation. And I just think that's a great thing to shoot for. But first, we need to have the other cutting edge new idea, which is this prompt decommissioning, which, you know, we're all asking questions like, well, how can you do it so quickly, and how are you going to get that done? Good questions, but don't shy away from the vision. Don't kick the can down the road, because these problems, whatever problems there are now, they're also going to be here 50 years from now. If anything, perhaps worse, but we will have lost the opportunity of the economic benefit that this is going to bring. So I just encourage you to, you know, be thorough, do the vetting, do the job, but don't shy away from the vision too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have John Field, and followed by John Field is Betsy Williams.
Hi, my name's John Field. I'm from Putney, and I want to thank you again also for coming down and taking such an interest in this. It's kind of hard for an ordinary citizen, an ordinary Vermonter, who is not steeped in nuclear engineering background, complex financial instruments background, much less mitigation of environmental problems, to speak with any kind of credibility or authority. We are not paid. The large industries have consultants to prepare documents and go to school and hire PhDs. So it's with some disadvantage, I feel, that ordinary people who are not technically trained testify. But remembering the P in the PSB, that you represent the public, I would ask you to consider the following things. Number one, I read recently an article by a gentleman by the name, and I'm going to forward this on to you for your consideration, Fred Gatt. He's a Brit, G-A-T-T-E. He's an underwriter of the British Nuclear Underwriters Association. And he warns about the terrible lessons from AREVA. There's a long article. This is an underwriting insurance professional in Britain from the British nuclear industry who warns about the real chain of disasters that happened in France upon AREVA's mismanagement, and what my understanding is what's happened in France is that due to what was going to be the bankruptcy of AREVA being one of the partners in this proposed dream team, the French citizenry, the French citizens, the taxpayers, are bailing out AREVA's mess. I think many Vermonters are worried that the same thing could occur here. And it is kind of a paradox, and a scary one at that this deal is being embedded in with the same company that showed such poor performance in France. That's the first thing that I would hope that you guys would take into consideration. I think it's kind of a too big to fail kind of thing. Who would have thought that Lehman Brothers would have failed, and all these other banks that went down in 2007-8, but they did. And we are still bailing them out. The second thing I would ask you to consider is, to me, as a layperson, it seems like there's an essential conflict of interest between a private corporation, in this case, North Star, and their need to build a profitable operation and extract profit from their operations, and the public's need for assurance of a clear, cleaned up radiological and non-radiological site. If I'm the company that's you know, as Chris said, is going to relieve myself by the relief of liability, my incentive is to do the job as inexpensively as I can so that I can reap the most profit. I mean, it doesn't take a PhD to recognize that. So I'm worried about the essential conflict of interest that's embedded in this deal. The last thing I'd like to say is I understand that the need to try to finish the mess and the sadness, the loss of jobs, the loss of income, the loss of houses, and all the other losses that the people of Vermont, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire have sustained, there is an honest need to try to, as one of the speakers said, put it behind you. But to me, grabbing the grail of promises that have been produced by the North Star spokesman is a really dangerous proposition. I think that I would urge you folks to please take your time, perhaps stretch out the process so that we don't, in our effort to get this place cleaned up, grab onto something that could potentially leave Vermont taxpayers in an awful lot of liability ourselves. Thanks.
Thank you, Betsy Williams, and following Betsy Williams, Peter Vanderdoes.
My name is Betsy Williams. I live in Westminster West, Vermont. And I agree with a lot of what some previous speakers have said. One thing I wanted to start with is I do think that there's actually a huge area of agreement that I'm hearing from everybody I've heard in this room so far, is that I don't think anyone in this room would disagree that we all want to ultimately have a clean and safe site over where Vermont Yankee is right now. All of us would like nothing better. I would like nothing better than to not have essentially a nuclear waste dump just down the river from where I live. And I'm not particularly enthusiastic about the idea of it remaining under the control of Entergy and taking 60 years to get there. At the same time, I'm very, very concerned. And I share, many of these things have already been said, and it was talked about at some length in the information session before we started this part of the hearing. The representative from North Star has outlined, I'm sure, very, very detailed, specific plans of how they would do this decommissioning within a certain budget. And if they could do that, that would be really swell. But there is no guarantee. And I believe that the Public Service Board needs to, and I know that there are efforts afoot already in this, and I applaud those, to have assurance that the state of Vermont will not be held liable for any of the costs associated with this decommissioning, no matter what. No matter if the costs go over, no matter if the company that, they kept saying, well, it will be the owner. Well, okay, but what happens if this limited liability corporation that owns it goes belly up? Then what? Then who? And I'm not hearing anybody answer that question, and it keeps being asked, and nobody is answering that question of what happens then. Because it seems to me, and I would love to be corrected, that it would then fall to the people who live here to have to do something. That's one concern. Another concern I have, a couple of speakers ago, a gentleman was talking about the high-level waste being taken to Texas. While in my own self-interest, that sounds lovely, it does not sound very lovely for a couple of very important reasons. One is that the way it would be transported to Texas is on our railway systems, as I understand it. Doesn't strike me as a very viable option to transport some of the most dangerous substances known to humankind on rail systems through some of the most heavily, densely populated regions of our country, and then putting it in Texas. Whether they want it or not, doesn't seem like a very good plan to me. Another concern that I'm hoping that the Public Service Board will do is that in whatever parameters are set for, should this transfer happen, that the highest possible standards known to us now, there's been a lot of talk about how technology has improved and we can do everything faster and cheaper and we know how to do it better That's great. Let's make sure that we vet out to find the highest possible standard for the removal of waste that exists and hold this company to that standard. Because I would agree with what John was just saying, you know, the company is trying to do this within a budget, and there are a couple of ways you do that. You either do it, you find shortcuts that are less expensive, or you don't do it to the standard that you need to. If it's not gonna fit, if the standard you hoped was not gonna fit within budget, those are kind of your two options. So I would hope that the Public Service Board will make sure to hold them to the highest possible standard available. And I also want to share the concern raised by Chris Williams. I do have a Chris Williams who's a brother, but that's not him. That there is great concern I have for a decommissioning process happening right across the street from an elementary school. And that any residual dust or fumes or whatever that I'm presuming would happen with any, even if you're doing it well, that would happen, that there could be risk to the children right across the street. And I have great concerns about that as well. So I just would hope that in the process of getting to what we all want, which is a fully clean site where alternative energies can start being sourced there, that would be a fabulous thing. We all want that. And it's really the question is not about that. The question is about how do we get there, and whether or not we can get there in a way that will hold the correct people responsible for the cost of it, and will get us there in a way that is responsible as citizens not only of Vermont and Massachusetts and New Hampshire, who are all impacted by this, but also as citizens of this planet and what we're leaving for the generations to come. Thank you very much for coming down and allowing us the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Peter Vanderdoes, and then we have one more speaker on the list after him, and that's Gary Sachs. And if anyone else wants to speak who is not signed up, we have another. We have a clipboard, so please add your name if you're still interested.
Peter Vanderdoes from Brattleboro. First, I want to thank the Public Service Department for their hard work representing all the stakeholders here, and very belatedly congratulate Ms. Hudson on her promotion. Very belatedly. Make no mistake, I think most people here would really like to see this go through. There are some caveats that I'd like to cover. There are technical problems which can occur, and there are also cost overrides. North Star, in its previous life as LVI Services, is virtually spotless, with many, many years of taking down industrial structures. However, in its recent reincarnation as North Star, it has chosen partners that bear a closer look. It would have been easier and much less expensive Googling court cases and doing queries in Google News for reports on technical competency or financial soundness, rather than using Coopers and Lybrand or whoever to do the due diligence. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Areva, that I have been against since they were Framatome. Areva has a $7 billion hole, which the French government, through their 80% owned Électricité de France, has tried to patch it up with a $2 billion euro buyout of part of its organization just to get it through another year. They also have a lawsuit with TVO, the Finnish Nuclear Authority, because they're 9 years behind construction schedule, and it's costing the Finnish 10.2 billion euros, or 3 times the original cost estimate. Not to mention a colossal technical screw-up during a major ISFAC design-build project when Areva forgot to include the all-important drying process in the transition from spent fuel into dry casks. 3 years after they began construction on this project, they were excluded from it by Enelgatom, the Ukrainian nuclear authority. Burns and McDonnell, another North Star partner, was sued by a regional airport in Branson, Missouri, because the $70 million runway foundation that they were the consultant engineers on collapsed 2 years after the facility opened. As consulting engineers for the retrofit of a municipal incinerator, Burns McDonnell stated in 1999 that the initial cost was going to be between $45 and $47 million. By 2007, the project, still unfinished, and the cost had ballooned to $90.3 million. They were also consultants to a tannery which used hexavalent chromium as a fertilizer. 18 foreign families were afflicted with brain damage and various other ailments and were awarded $10 million in the suit. I don't think that brought back their health. Make no mistake, we all want this decommissioning to go through, and these partners might be the best in the business, or at least the best known. But what we want are sound legal instruments which will guarantee payment of all decommissioning costs and solid legal commitments guaranteeing the site restoration with the same radiation release standards as Maine Yankee. In other words, 10 millirem. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary Sachs, and following Gary will be Leo Schiff.
Survivors of cancer. We're trying to figure out where cancer comes from. Maybe you guys have something. We both survived from lymphoma in the past year. Lots of gratitude. Dilution is not a solution to pollution. It certainly is not the solution to pollution when it comes to radiation. Have I heard North Star or Entergy North Star speak of rubblization? I believe Ms. Hoffman was available in the PSB hearing rooms when it was clearly stated during the aughts that rubblization would not be used here at Vermont Yankee, because rubblization is basically the epitome of dilution is the solution to pollution. We don't want that. Okay, we really can't have that. This is radiation. No. Well, the genie is outside the bottle. Burlington, Vermont is on the irradiation this week from Veterans Today, so the gamma radiation is here. You guys live up there, we don't. You live in Norwich, I know. So, rubblization is North Star's way around the decontamination issue. Perhaps this is why when I read the North Star application, I did not see decontamination written. I saw decommissioning written, but not decontamination, to which I want to draw to your attention as PSB. They are decontaminating a severely contaminated radioactive site that is known to leak, that has low-level leaks that they've tossed into the back 40 that we heard about in the PSB hearings. That's going to cost more for them to decommission. But they are planning on decommissioning at their $513 million cutoff, or whatever it is. I can't bring it that close. Oh boy. Remember when this thing got announced? It was November 8th. What kind of stupid corporation announces this sale of this big on election day? Do you really want to make sure we don't look at it? Yeah, maybe nobody will notice. That drove me nuts. To me, I think if it was real or genuine or authentic, it wouldn't have been announced that day. It would have been announced on a day when people were available to see it or hear it. Okay, who is North Star? Sure. Okay, great. Who is North Star Group Services, LLC? If we go to sue somebody, the state of Vermont goes to sue somebody, let's say 15 years from now, Because let's say the 125 million is not enough, it's left to the ratepayers. Sure, I was there when we sold the reactor to Entergy. And I know that we sold it to Entergy because Vermont doesn't know how to decommission a reactor. That's why we owned it. We don't know how to decommission. Entergy did. They took care of Maine Yankee after it was sold, after it closed. But Entergy doesn't want to be in the decommissioning business. They want to hook up with, I guess it's North Star Decommissioning Group LLC, which is made up of Burns and McDonnell, Arriva, and it'll come in a minute. Burns and McDonnell, Arriva, and Waste Control Specialists. Arriva. To the best of my awareness, Arriva is owned by a Japanese company. Okay, Japan is under a state secret law, such that we may not be able to get, so you were wrong, wait a minute, but maybe I'm wrong. So Arriva was formerly Siemens, and was recently noted by the NRC when they tried to buy Calvert Cliffs. I don't know what Arriva's business is in the United States anymore. Okay, they can't be the primary owner of a reactor. We learned that in 2014 or 15, when they tried to buy Calvert Cliffs, and the NRC said no. I don't know if Arriva is in other companies in the country, or if this is North Star's approach to bring Arriva into this country. I don't know. I don't know what Arriva's doing in this country.
They do fuel sales.
And needless to say, as other people have mentioned to you, Arriva, the branch of Electricity de France, has more than enough issues of its own right now. Currently, well, let's just talk about the Crusoe Forge. That's good enough. The Crusoe Forge is owned by Arriva, but yet they made nuclear parts that were not actually up to snuff. So there are a number of reactors in this country with parts by Arriva's Crusoe Forge. I'd like to see them shut down, but that's not why you're here. You're here to talk about this sale. Well, a couple of weeks ago, General Electric announced that they're going to Europe to decommission reactors. General Electric is who built this reactor. I wonder if Entergy went to GE and said, you guys want to decommission your reactor? I tend to doubt it. I think North Star might have been cheaper. So I also have a question as far as if there's a lawsuit down the road from Vermont, not that Entergy ever sued Vermont, really. Not that Entergy ever sued Vermont. How many times did Entergy sue Vermont? Who can count? Okay, but because they're closing, that's all history now. We love them as a good company now. I'm sorry, I don't. They've lied to us numerous times. I believe this whole North Star deal is a made-up Entergy spinco. But that's just my thought. Waste control specialist, yes, they're trying to do the high-level nuclear waste above the Ogallala Aquifer in Andrews County, Texas. I'd rather have my waste stay in Vernon. I've been to Maine, and I've seen the Maine Yankee site. No, they have dry casts. It is not accessible to the public. It's about 200, I don't know if it's 100 yards or 200 yards, but you can't get anywhere near the dry casks. We have a much smaller site than Maine Yankee. I don't think it'll be open to the public while the waste is still there. And I don't see the stranded waste is going anywhere quickly. I don't know how much radiation is on the site, but I've heard that North Star says it wants to take 98% of it away. If we don't know the 100% number, how are we going to know the 98% number? And how are we going to know how much they're leaving behind? You know, because if they go through with their mobilization, I also have something to say about the Entergy tactic that came through in the revenue sharing agreement, which I don't know if it's a part of this deal or not. If the Public Service Board doesn't agree to this deal as it's put out by North Star Entergy, does that close the deal? I don't know, because that's how it was for the revenue sharing agreement. And I don't consider that to be a negotiation. I consider that to be a
Loaded dice.
you have your arm behind your back and you're forced into it. That's I don't have the right term in my head. I get nervous at microphones. I've been doing it for a long time. I don't like doing it. I have a life. I don't want to this stuff, or I don't want to make believe to know it. I want to know who you're going to sue. 10 years down the road, who do you sue? If, let's say, Arriva cuts a part wrong, or waste control specialist cuts a part wrong, and it can't be transported, and it costs more, and it goes out of the money, it goes out beyond the money factor, who does the state of Vermont sue? North Star, Mr. State? That doesn't really make sense if it's an Arriva issue or a waste control specialist issue point. So that's why I don't like the one person, one point person concept of Mr. State. It didn't read right. Between that and not seeing decontamination in the application, it didn't work for me at all. There are no guarantees this process works. As the man who researched it from Vermont Law School stated, he looked. It hasn't been done before. Wow, we have 942 things to do, but who knows if it's going to work? Not to mention, if they get into the third thing and find that it takes them to the 17th, then they get to rewrite the whole numbers. So waste control specialists, they're owned by another company. They are a subdivision of Entergy Solutions. And Burns and McDonald, I don't know why we don't have Entergy Solutions here. Instead, we have waste control specialists. Where's their parent corp? What do they say about this? And then Burns and McDonald, I don't know how to draw this connection. So when in doubt, I can leave it out, but I'm pretty sure there's a connection between Burns and McDonald and Mallinckrodt, which Mallinckrodt is a pharmaceutical company that was known to have created a number of radioactive isotopes that were left in various places around St. Louis. SLAPS is an acronym to follow, SLAPS, St. Louis, blah, blah, blah. There's the burning waste in Bridgeton in the landfill, in the Westlake landfill. That could have something to do with Burns and McDonald and their fine engineering, but I don't know that. One thing I saw in the application was that it was important for Mr. State to have the land. That's what I've heard people talk about here is the land. It's become clear to me that there is a right of first refusal. The state of Vermont have the right of first refusal. And that's an issue before you guys. I don't understand why North Star has to own VY. When I read it in the application, it read like gobbledygook. Because of their business plan, it's important that they own the reactor to then do their proper decommissioning the right way. It didn't read logically. It's like every other reactor that's decommissioned, they maintain ownership, and the company comes in like Entergy did at Maine and decommissions it. And then they return the site to Maine Yankee, or Yankee Atomic, whoever it was. Arriva is sounding more and more like Westinghouse. Thank you.
Thank you. Leo Schiff next, and then Lori Cartwright.
Thank you for coming down here tonight. My name's Leo Schiff from Brattleboro. I'm part of the Safe and Green campaign. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. This is a pretty complicated issue, and I really wanted to listen more than talk. But Guy Page inspired me to talk because Guy expressed the belief that we all want the high-level nuclear waste to leave Vermont, to leave Vernon. And I have to say, I'm not so sure that's a good idea. That waste belongs to us. We, the people, the energy users in Vermont, are the ones who, on some level, benefited from its creation. And it's our job to be the stewards of that waste. And as the Public Service Board, I think that you have in your interest the long-term health, safety, economic well-being of Vermont. And I think that responsible stewardship of this waste is part of that charge. So this waste will be highly toxic longer than the state of Vermont has existed. It will be highly toxic longer than the entire Judeo-Christian history. And what I'd like to see, really, and I know this is kind of a pipe dream, I'd like to see most of the waste stay in Vernon, the high-level waste, where we can pass along the story from generation to generation of how toxic it is and how we need to care for it. But in order to ensure that that story continue well, I'd like to see a portion of the waste on the State House lawn in Montpelier, where our lawmakers, our publicly elected representatives also keep it in mind for responsible stewardship. And since Burlington is the largest city and the economic engine of the state of Vermont, I'd be happy to see a few dry casks right at the top of the Church Street Marketplace, so that that part of Vermont also gets to think about this product, this high-level waste, and care for it for as long as it continues to be a danger for the people around it. So I hope that in your deliberations about this sale, that you keep in mind the safe and responsible care of this really important waste product, and not look for a quick and cheap solution of foisting our responsibility off on other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Cartwright next, followed by Ned Childs, and at this point Ned Childs is the last speaker tonight, unless someone will begin. We do? Oh, take that back. We will have some more after that. So go ahead, Lori. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Cartwright from Brattleboro. I am on the board of New England Coalition. We're an intervener in this matter. However, I am here speaking tonight on my own behalf. I do also want to thank you for coming to Wyndham County and not having us all drive up to Montpelier. And like so many here tonight, I would like nothing more than to see a faster decontamination of the Vernon, Vermont Yankee site. However, I do have cause for alarm due to some of the items that have been in the news regarding some of the entities that are hoping to take over the responsibility of this matter. And I know that sometimes when things seem too good to be true, they are. So I would just implore the board to please do its homework, do its due diligence. And yes, I'm sure the majority, if not all Vermonters, would like to see this site cleaned up faster, but not at the cost, the great cost of safety. I know we're not supposed to talk about radiological safety, but there are other safety concerns. There are many contaminants, known and unknown, not of the radiological type, on the site. And to do it cheaper and faster isn't always necessarily the safest. And for many generations of Vermonters to follow, we have a great responsibility, an enormous responsibility. And yes, Vernon is the site, but this is a matter, the contamination doesn't stay within the boundaries and the borders of this town. It travels across the state, it travels across the nation, it travels across the earth. And so I do implore you to do your due diligence and not just take a quick, easy deal that might look good at first blush. And I'm not implying that I think that you would do that. I know you all take your positions very seriously, and we appreciate the hard work that you're doing for the public. I have been confused for a long time when I read about the hopes of the town and others to repurpose the site. Yes, we do want to see that site repurposed, but I'm not personally aware of any other nuclear reactor site that has been decommissioned, that has been released to be repurposed. Perhaps portions of these sites have been, but as long as the high-level waste remains on site, the site will not be able to be released for redevelopment. And I apologize if I'm not using the correct jargon, but I hope it's clear what I mean. Yes, if we could continue to produce energy there, and ideally clean, green energy, not nuclear energy. It's not clean and it's not green. I don't care who says it. It's not backed up by science. Yes, let's produce clean, green energy there, but until the waste is removed, I don't know where people are getting these notions, and there's a lot of people, very smart people, spending probably a lot of hours talking and planning, but it's a pipe dream, and I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but it's just not happening. And like Mr. Schiff, I do feel like we have a responsibility to continue to host it. I don't think that the racial justice movement would be too pleased to learn that we're considering shipping our high-level radioactive waste to a less than, I don't want to say this and sound rude, but it's not a very economically viable part of the country. I mean, sure, they might think they want it, but they don't. And shipping it on rail has been mentioned. You shudder to think of the possibilities of accidents. And we talk about the millirems of the radiation that we want to have this company agree to leave us. I don't want to know about millirems. I want to know how many tens or hundreds of thousands of cancer deaths those numbers represent. The difference between 100 for a brownfield for millirems, 25, 15. It's all very complicated, I'm sure, but at the end of the day, how many cancer deaths does each millirem represent? Thank you.
Thank you. Ned Childs. And then Lisa Weinman.
Testing. Good evening, Sarah. I haven't met you yet. And welcome to everybody here tonight. We've had a chance to meet and be with each other over the years, so this is just a little bit of a historical slant. It's a part of the debate that is somehow left out. So with apologies to the good residents of Vernon, I'm from Dummerston, Ned Childs. I'm also found at the New England Coalition from time to time and speak as a private citizen. So, 25 years ago, our fathers brought forth here, upon this field, a fantastic and grievous land use crime. In case you wonder where I stood. So we are met here on this field of a heinous and willful crime against the future of all life on this rocky and watery planet. In the name of almighty greed, with plans hatched back in the 50s and 60s for untold profits to be had from large-scale uranium utilization, our forefathers from General Electric and the Atomic Energy Commission caused to be built here a gigantic factory designed for the production of poisonous biotoxins. As a byproduct of this reaction, quantities of electricity are made available for sale. Electricity which we can all agree is largely wasted. So here we are at the end of this promise-plagued road with $500 million more or less still in the bank to clean up this thoroughly polluted and irradiated once bucolic site right across from Vernon's elementary school and their town offices. Behold the bitter irony as we debate ways to reduce the residual gamma shine from the site, from the spent fuel assemblies in their slowly failing concrete and steel canisters, while poisonous tritium leaches into the local groundwaters, and where also cesium, strontium, and plutonium abound at the site. Efforts to control these toxic legacies gobbling up our precious monies by the $5 and $10 million per year ad infinitum. And for what? So that big utilities could attempt to maintain their control of the sale of retail electricity for a few decades more. While these same utilities caused distributed solar and wind to die on the vine, and public service boards of years past, and joint congressional committees gone by, university research grant recipients from Harvard and Yale to MIT over the years have all been complicit in this unnecessary crime, which was designed to monetize uranium ore for private profits, while the unwitting and underserved public always, the hapless public, always picks up the unrelenting costs with their taxes and with their health. The cost of this horrendous, poisonous, and most importantly, unnecessary uranium folly. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I have one more name, and it's Lissa Weinman.
I'll just hold it. Thanks. So I'm Lissa Weinman, and I live in Brattleboro, Vermont, and I also have a business in downtown Brattleboro, and raised my family here in the evacuation zone of the reactor, and was pleased to see it closed. But since then, I've been doing a lot of study about the issue of nuclear waste and the policy around it. I've attended meetings with the DOE in Washington, some of their consent-based siting gatherings, and I've been taking a very close look at the issue, and it's interesting when you hear people say, let's put this issue to bed. Well, there is no putting this issue to bed, because there is no central repository. Yucca Mountain will not be redeployed. The waste isolation pilot project in Carlsbad, which is sort of a defense waste repository and was being thought of as the sort of model, had an explosion a couple years ago, is not closed, and has no date where it's going to be reopened. So, you know, the conventional wisdom about this idea that one day we'll have a central repository where all the waste will go has really, as someone called it, has really been a pipe dream. So I really appreciate the fact that Vernon wants the waste to go, but guys, just take a look at the DOE reports and the gatherings. The waste is going nowhere. The PACT and the Texas site, I do not have high hopes for that. And even if you talk to the DOE officials, and you should talk to them as part of these gatherings, they don't think anything's going anywhere for at least 40 years. So what I would like to propose is similar to the sort of outlandish, some of you might think, concept that, well, we all want the waste to leave. Well, maybe there's another way to go about it. You know, maybe the thing that Vermont should be looking at is eliminate the middleman. I mean, North Star is coming in here to do a job. Why? Why? It does sound a little too good to be true, right? I mean, it's like, oh, we're going to do this. What's in it for North Star? Why are they picking up something that Entergy doesn't see money in? How come North Star sees money in the process? Well, the reason they want the land and they want the standing is because they know that they're going to be suing the federal government in perpetuity to care for that waste. And I'm wondering, you know, well, if the waste has to be cared for potentially on the banks of the Connecticut River in perpetuity, maybe Vernon and the state of Vermont should be looking at taking that role on somehow and suing the federal government and managing the waste and getting the money and being responsible, because at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, then we are going to be responsible. There is going to be no one to sue. There's a crisis with nuclear waste storage in the United States. The policies around it will have to change. There's no more room in the spent storage pools. We need to have interim waste facilities, but the conventional wisdom is moving more toward prolonged, hardened on-site storage. And if that is the case, and we're going to be looking at least another 50 years of having this stuff here, maybe we should think about, what's in it for us? Maybe we should be suing the federal government and doing that job for ourselves. I don't know how we would do it, but maybe that's worthy of examination. Eliminate the middleman here, which is North Star and these, somewhat questionable partners that they've put together. So I just put that out there because I think that there's a lot that Vermont can do to take care of this waste that could be profitable for us in the long run. There's the nuclear waste fund has something like $30 billion in it. That is earmarked specifically for the use of creating a new centralized storage facility that we now know and the federal government is acknowledging is not going to happen. So what's going to happen to that $30 billion in nuclear waste fund? Well, maybe some of that can go to us and we can build a state-of-the-art facility here and turn it back into our own economy. So I just, I put it out there. I look at this issue. We'll be looking at a lot more in the days ahead, but just be careful about what looks too good to be true, because it certainly, most of the time, it isn't.
Is that 30 billion in a lockbox?
Thank you. I don't know where it is.
I don't think it's there.
Well, it is there, but that's a more complicated issue. But it is there, and the industry knows it's
Sure,
there.
it's not in a box that
The
says
people
I
don't like
own
to talk about the nuclear waste fund because the industry wants it sort of kept quiet, but it is there, and it was legislated, and they paid a tax into it for many, many years. So they know it's there.
I think it got spent on CU.
Thank you very much. I believe we have no more people signed up to speak, so I just want to thank everyone again for coming out on this very rainy, nasty night, and your comments again are truthful. Oh, we do have another speaker? Okay. Thank you.
I did have a very brief comment.
All right, could you speak, state your name, please?
My name is Clay Turnbull. I'm a resident of Townsend, Vermont. I am a trustee and I work at New England Coalition, but tonight I had a brief comment just from myself as an individual. And that is, I would hope that we can all get around the concept of seeing this site cleaned up to a standard that's at least 100% as clean as was achieved in Maine and that Massachusetts is working for. Right now, it's proposed at 150%. And I'd like to see it at 100%. Let's get Vermont as clean as Maine Yankee has been cleaned up and Massachusetts has committed to and is working toward. We should be at least as clean as they've achieved in Maine. And already it's not proposed to be that clean, and I believe it should be. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and I just want to remind you that comments can continue to be submitted, and the instructions on how to do that are at either end of the table. We'll also be having another public hearing in Vernon in early September, and evidentiary hearings will be held in the late fall in a site to be determined in Montpelier. Thank you again very much for coming.